A very good evening to one and all. I welcome you all to this news analysis initiative. These are the articles that are important from UPSC perspective. Without any further delay, we will start with the first one. The first article for the day is related to Vande Mataram, and it is 150 years of Vande Mataram, that is from 1875 to 2025. I have given a detailed infographic in my Telegram channel. You can download it from there. However, I'll just give an overview. The meaning of Vande Mataram is Mother, I bow to thee. And it was composed by Bankim Chandra Chattopadhyay. And the inspiration for this Vande Mataram has been taken from Atharva Veda and Devi Mahatmya. And it was first published in Bangadarshan magazine and later included in Anandamath, and it was given music by Rabindranath Tagore. The next article for the day is Democracy's Paradox, the chosen people of the state. Let's break this article in a very simple way. The article basically tells us this. In India, citizenship is the foundation for two big things: getting a passport and getting your name on the voters list. But the problem is, none of these documents truly prove citizenship because they can be forged or wrongly issued. Why is this an issue now? Because the Election Commission has started a special intensive revision of voter rolls across the country. This involves checking whether people on the electoral rolls are actually citizens. And that triggered a huge debate. Does the Election Commission even have the power to decide who is a citizen? Isn't that the Home Ministry's job? What happens if people are wrongly excluded? The bigger point is India has no single legal proof of citizenship. There is no one document in India that can say, yes, this person is definitely an Indian citizen. Even passport, it is not a final proof. Voter ID, not a final proof. Aadhaar ID, it is not a citizenship proof. So, what happens when the state doubts someone's citizenship? The burden of proof is on the individual. You have to prove you are a citizen, not the other way around. The Citizenship Amendment Act, after amendments, says a national register of citizens can be created. Only those who prove they are citizens will be included. Everyone else gets tagged as doubtful. And this is where the democratic paradox comes in. In theory, people create the state and people are the source of power. But in practice, the state decides who the people are. That's the democracy paradox. The person who verifies citizenship may be a local clerk, a village official, a police constable, or an election commission officer. Your rights depend on the judgment of the lowest level bureaucrat. In Assam, NRC marked 19 lakh people as doubtful citizens. Many were genuine residents but didn't have old documents. Political disagreements arose because many excluded people were Hindus and not just migrants. This showed citizenship decisions can be messy. They can depend on documents 40 to 50 years old. They can determine whether someone votes, stays, or gets deported. In India, this problem becomes sharp because citizenship law is complex, no universal proof exists, bureaucratic discretion is very high, and political stakes are huge. The next article for the day, the real story of the India Russia summit. We have seen it many times. I'll just give a quick recap. Why the summit was a big deal, first of all, this wasn't just another bilateral meeting because Putin came to India for the first time since the Ukraine war began, and he brought a very high powered delegation with him. That itself sent a message that India is not distancing itself from Russia despite global pressure, and Russia still sees India as a priority partner. The summit focused on practical economic and strategic cooperation. The first is the trade and economy. Program 2030. Both sides agreed to boost trade to $100 billion by 2030 to remove non-tariff barriers, trade in national currencies, expand ties in fertilizers, railways, minerals, and pharmaceuticals. This matters because Russia has huge untapped economic potential and India needs reliable partners for energy and raw materials. The next is energy, which is the biggest pillar. India is the world's second largest fossil fuel importer. Russia has the largest reserves, so affordable energy is equal to national security. Next, new areas of cooperation. These three are emerging fast. The first is the maritime routes, Chennai Vladivostok corridor, Northern Sea Route, and shipbuilding. Second is Arctic collaboration. Russia even offered to train Indian seafarers. Third, sending Indian skilled workers to Russia. This is huge because Russia's population is shrinking, especially after wartime losses. India fills exactly the talent gap they have. It is a win win deal for both the countries. The next is the defense and strategic sectors. Russia has helped India for decades with space, nuclear, missiles, and defense technology. Examples are BrahMos and S 400. And India will continue buying Russian spare parts while simultaneously pushing indigenization. So the summit shows India is reshaping the Russia relationship for the next decade. India is balancing between US, Europe, Russia and China without choosing any sides. And India sees peace in Ukraine as essential for global stability and its own interest. India wants to stay close to Russia while maintaining strong ties with the West. The next article is a new step in the dragon elephant tango, and it is written by a Chinese consul general in Kolkata. See, the article basically says China has just approved its 15th 5-year plan, and it's not just a roadmap for China, it creates new opportunities for the world, including India. Okay, and both India and China are at critical development stages because China is pushing its model of Chinese modernization. India is moving towards its Viksit Bharat 2047 vision. So development becomes the strongest common ground between the two. This article also gives the China's economic performance, which is 5.5% annual growth, nearly $20 trillion economy, and advancements in clean energy, manufacturing, and innovation. So, how can India and China engage together? Number one, trade and economic cooperation. China is already one of India's biggest trading partners, over $138 billion in 2024. They want India to use their big trade expos, increase exports, and deepen engagement. The message is economically, we both gain if we work together. Second, complementary strengths. China is strong in manufacturing, electronics, EVs, and AI. India is strong in IT, software, and pharma. So, both sides benefit if industries link up, especially in the age of new tech revolutions. Third, people to people engagement. Flights have resumed, visas restarted, pilgrimages reopened. China is trying to soften the relationship by focusing on culture, yoga, movies, and tourism. Number 4, multilateral platforms. Both are heavyweight players in BRICS, SCO, and G20. The article stresses that India and China must work together on big global issues like climate change, food security, global reforms, and multipolarity. The Chinese message is simple. If the dragon and the elephant move together, Asia stabilizes and the world benefits. The next article is this carceral culture. The Supreme Court basically said prisons cannot ignore disability rights anymore. This came up because people with disabilities suffered hugely in jail, not because of their crimes, but because the system refused them basic disability support. So the court stepped in and said disability rights don't stop at the prison gate. So what's the core issue? Most prison manuals in India were written decades ago. They assume every prisoner is physically fit, able bodied, able to clean, move, stand, bathe, use toilets on their own. But the reality is different. Today, jails have persons with physical disabilities, elderly prisoners, prisoners with mental illness, and many who face multiple layers of discrimination like caste and disability. Yet, the system treats their sufferings as part of the punishment. Now, why the Supreme Court intervened? Because the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act 2016 requires full accessibility in all government institutions, including prisons. But state prison manuals haven't been updated to reflect this. The court said prisons must identify disabilities at the time of admission, provide mobility aids, helpers, accessible toilets, beds, and ramps. They should also ensure no caste based job assignment. They must also record and monitor disability data and train their staff in dealing with vulnerable prisoners. This is a big shift from punishment to dignity. But there is a structural problem associated. Prisons are run by states, but model rules are made by the center. Disability laws exist, but caste discrimination rules exist. Yet, prisons operate as if none of these rights apply. So, this gap is what the Supreme Court is trying to close. The real challenge is carceral austerity. We spend money on walls, CCTVs, and guards, but not on ramps, wheelchairs, helpers, or counseling. The court said prison budgets must now treat accessibility, disability support, and anti discrimination as core obligations and not optional luxuries. See, I remember a statement read from a book which says punishment is loss of liberty, not loss of dignity. And the Supreme Court is actually forcing prisons to recognize this, especially for disabled and marginalized prisoners. It is a very important data point that 6.15 lakh crore rupees are written off by public sector banks. Just note it down. The next article is India Post DHRUVA framework. If Aadhaar solved identity and UPI solved payments, India's next digital leap is to solve addresses. This India Post DHRUVA, which is Digital Hub for Reference and Unique Virtual Address Framework, aims to turn every physical address into a standardized, verifiable, tokenized digital asset, just like a UPI ID. Think of DHRUVA as a digital address system where your home becomes something like your name at DHRUVA. Okay, this single label can store your full descriptive address. It is positioned as digital public infrastructure, open, interoperable, and useful across government and private platforms. What are the key components of DHRUVA ecosystem? The first is the DigiPin. It is a 10-digit alphanumeric code for every 12 square meter block in India. It is developed by India Post and it helps to pinpoint rural or descriptive poor addresses. The second, address service providers. Like payment service providers in UPI, address service providers will issue your DHRUVA label. The third is address validation agencies. They will authenticate and verify the accuracy of addresses. The fourth is address information agents. To manage the consent, who can access your address, when, and for how long. The next is a national governance entity on the lines of NPCI to set rules and ensure interoperability. What are the major use cases of DHRUVA if you take? The first is the consent-based address sharing. Instead of entering your address everywhere, you simply share a label. The second is the seamless address updates. Moving houses becomes simple. You update your address once, all linked platforms update automatically. Bank, e-commerce, LPG, postal, government portals, everywhere. Third, stronger logistics and last mile delivery, particularly useful for rural areas with ambiguous addresses, gig workers, e-commerce and postal delivery. Fourth, governance and service delivery. DHRUVA can support disaster response, doorstep services, geo-targeted welfare delivery and municipal service mapping. However, this is not automatic. It depends on whether enough people generate DHRUVA labels. So what are the concerns that are associated? The first is the urban governance data set may be incomplete, which means because address data is consent based, citizens may choose not to share. Then it leads to patchy data sets and it reduces the usefulness for city planning and population mapping. The second is privacy and data protection issues. Since addresses are linked to individuals, a legal framework is required to regulate how address data is shared and to ensure DPDP Act compliance and prevent unauthorized surveillance. There is a need for statutory backing. India Post has proposed amendments to the Post Office Act 2023, but full implementation needs a dedicated legal architecture. Fourth is the adoption challenge because success depends on citizen uptake, platform integration, awareness campaigns, and rural digital literacy. What is the way forward? A strong privacy by design framework, which means use minimal personal data, clear consent mechanisms, and audit trails. Second, legislative backing for address standardization. A DHRUVA Act may be required. Third, incentivize adoption. Simplify KYC norms, banking updates, and delivery improvements. Number 4, urban governance integration without over reliance on personal data. We have to enable structural mapping separate from individual profiles. Number 5, focus on accessibility, that is multilingual, offline supported, and simple onboarding into platforms. Here there is a term genocide convention. We will look into its details. It is officially known as Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crimes of Genocide 1948. It codified the crime of genocide for the first time, and it was also the first human rights treaty adopted by the UN General Assembly. Okay, the crime of genocide is defined in Article 2 of the Genocide Convention, and it is defined as acts committed with the intent to destroy in whole or in part a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. According to the convention, genocide is a crime that can take place both in time of war as well as in time of peace. If you take the membership, the Genocide Convention has been ratified by 153 states. India has signed the treaty in 1949 and ratified in 1959. The states have obligation not to commit genocide and to take measures to prevent and to punish the crime of genocide, including by enacting relevant legislation and punishing perpetrators. However, India did not enact any legislation on the subject. International Court of Justice hears cases related to the interpretation and application of the convention. Okay, this is the next article. The Parliamentary Standing Committee on Education has taken a hard look at how the UGC and higher education institutions are functioning, especially around equity, discrimination, reservations, and regulatory clarity. And they have pointed out key concerns. The first is the recognizing OBC discrimination explicitly. Caste discrimination in campuses is not limited to SC or ST alone. OBC students also face bias, but this is not recognized in UGC's equity rules. So, the committee asked UGC to explicitly include discrimination against OBCs in the promotion of equity rules. The second is the EWS paradox in faculty recruitment. The committee said at associate professor and professor levels, EWS reservation simply cannot work. Why? Because to apply for these posts, you must already be an assistant professor or associate professor. And these positions already earn more than rupees 8 lakh annually, which automatically disqualifies them from EWS eligibility. So the committee recommended re-evaluate EWS quotas at higher faculty levels, since no one will ever meet the income criteria. So this is a good example for UPSC when asked about implementation challenges of reservation frameworks. The third concern is leadership vacancy in UGC. The UGC chairperson post has been vacant since April. The panel said this is unacceptable because UGC is the apex regulator. It handles accreditation, standards, reforms, and new regulations. The NEP 2020 restructuring needs tighter supervision. Concern number 4. States' feedback ignored in draft regulations. The draft UGC regulations 2025 have been circulated, but 10 states have flagged concerns. The committee said, discuss the regulations with the Central Advisory Board of Education to ensure cooperative federalism in higher education reforms. The next article is Fire Count gives a skewed picture of stubble burning. We keep hearing the government claim a 90% drop in stubble burning in Punjab and Haryana. We discussed this in last week analysis. But a new study says the number is exaggerated. Right now, India uses fire counts. Basically, how many active fire dots satellites detect in a day. The problem is these satellites only pass over India at fixed times around 10:30 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. So, if farmers burn stubble in the evening, satellites miss it entirely. Small fires also don't get captured. This means the fire count looks artificially low. The research by this iForest says that the government claims 90% to 92% reduction using fire counts. But when you look at actual burnt area, the reduction is only around 30% since 2022. This is a huge gap and it shows fire counts alone are not reliable. If data is wrong, then the policy will also be wrong. So, underestimation will lead to incorrect modeling of air pollution, wrong emission estimates, misguided allocation of funds, and false sense of achievement. So, what needs to be changed? We have to stop relying only on fire counts. We have to use burnt area and also geostationary satellite data. And we have to integrate multiple data sets for a 24/7 monitoring system. This is the next article. A parliamentary committee on education has recommended UGC recognition for Himalayan Institute of Alternatives, Ladakh. Okay, the institute started by Sonam Wangchuk because it is one of the best real life examples of how national education policy 2020 should look on the ground. It integrates experiential learning, sustainability, and local knowledge in education. And the committee also urged the UGC to grant recognition without delay. This becomes a governance case study. You can use this in education reforms, NEP 2020 implementation, innovation in higher education, local knowledge systems. The next article is Crypto transactions crossed 51,000 crore. Crypto trading in India is growing sharply despite tough tax rules. Now the numbers are in 24-25 Indians carried out 51,000 crore worth of crypto transactions. How do we know that? Because the government collected rupees 511.8 crore as TDS and TDS on crypto is 1%, meaning total trades are 51,180 crore. If we look at the trend, it is rising every year. 22-23, it was 22,000 crore approximately. In 23-24, it was 36,270 crores. In 24-25, it is 51,180 crores. That's a 41% jump in just 1 year. Now, why this matters for UPSC? The first is the regulatory angle. India still doesn't legally recognize crypto as currency. It's treated like a speculative asset with heavy tax controls. The second is the revenue angle. TDS gives the government visibility into transactions happening on Indian platforms. Third, economic behavior. Even with strict rules like 30% tax on gains and 1% TDS, Indians are actively trading, showing high retail interest. Number 4. Global context. It fits into discussions on global crypto regulations under G20, FATF and IMF frameworks. The next article, tax contribution versus devolution and why it matters. We will look into that. When the union government collects taxes, a portion of the pool is devolved to states based on finance commission formulas like population, income distance, etc. But some states put in far more than what they get back. Others get much more than what they contribute. States that contribute more than what they receive. I'll tell you the states. These are the net contributors. The first is the Maharashtra. Their contribution is 36.1% of India's taxes. And the devolution received is 6.65%, which is the biggest negative gap and it is known as the most donor state. If you take Karnataka, it is negative 8.8 percentage points. Haryana, it is 4.3. Gujarat, it is negative 3.5. Tamil Nadu, negative 2.95. So, meaning is these states pump more money into the union's tax pool than what they get back. Now, we will look at the states that receive more than they contribute. These are the net receivers. If you take Uttar Pradesh, they contribute 4.6%, but the devolution received is 15.8%. This is the largest positive difference. If you take Bihar, it is 8. If you take Madhya Pradesh, it is 5.5. Rajasthan, 3.55. Meaning is these states contribute less but get a higher share of central funds. Now we come to a question, why does this happen? Because Finance Commission devolution follows principles such as equity and equalization. Poorer states with lower tax capacity get more support. Income distance formula, wider gap from the richest state, more funds. Third is the population weight, which is the 2011 census. The next is the need based expenditure. So the system intentionally channels more funds to less developed states. It highlights the fiscal federalism debate. That is, richer states feel penalized for performing well, like tax effort, GDP growth. And poorer states argue redistribution is necessary for balanced development. The next is the places in news. Thailand and Cambodia. They were in the news due to cross border tensions and airstrike related developments along their shared boundary. The border between Thailand and Cambodia was established in 1962, and there is a dispute between Thailand and Cambodia related to that, because border claimed by Thailand now lies within Cambodia, and that is the reason for this dispute. If you take the bordering countries, Thailand is surrounded by Myanmar, Laos, and Cambodia. And if you take Cambodia, it is surrounded by Thailand, Laos, and Vietnam. And these are the areas that are affected by this dispute, like Buriram, Surin, Sisaket, then Odar Mianche, and there is also a temple, Priya Vihar temple. Okay. And you must also look into this river, Mekong Ganga. It is a transboundary river and it flows through Thailand, Laos, and Cambodia. Please look into that also. That's all for today. Thank you all for joining.